Hi, my name is Victoria Ramos, and I'm here to talk about co-cultural theory. So the reason that I chose co-cultural theory is because being a woman of color, I fall under the category of the co-cultural group. And it also caught my attention because it shows how people from the co-cultural groups communicate with people from the dominant group in everyday life. So such as in work, at school, just at the grocery store, etc. I also wanted to see what struggles come with the co-cultural group and what struggles they have when finding the right communication approach. Right. So first, I want to talk about Mark Orb. Mark Orb has a PhD from Ohio University. He's a professor of communications and diversity at Western Michigan University, and he conducts research in interpersonal, intercultural communications, co-cultural communications, intergroup relations, mass media representations of underrepresented group members, and negotiation intersection of multiple cultural identities. So the reason that Mark Orb is so important is because since he conducts research of co-cultural communication, he has the most research on co-cultural theory, and from our book, he's the one who that they quote for the definition. And so, what is co-cultural theory? Co-cultural theory is a framework designed to provide insight into the communication behaviors of individuals with little societal power, generated primarily from the research of Mark Orb. Co-cultural theory focuses on how culture and power affect communications. So in other words, co-cultural theory is how people from the co-cultural group communicate with people from the dominant group in school, workplaces, and everyday life. Um, so you might be wondering who's part of what group, who's part of the co-cultural group, and who's part of the dominant group. So in the dominant group, it's rich, white, heterosexual men. So all these bulletin points, they show who people tend to go for more. So for example, if it's rich versus poor, people will tend to go more towards rich. If it's white versus color, most likely white, and etc. And then the main dominant person in the dominant group is rich, white, heterosexual men. So in the co-cultural group, it is women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people part of the LGBTQA plus community, people with disabilities, the poor, people who can't really take care of themselves, like very young or very old, and religious minorities like Muslims. So with co-cultural theory, there are two related theories that connect to co-cultural theory. So the first theory is the muted group theory. So the muted group theory is people from the co-cultural group must speak the dominant group's language, and the world is shaped to fit the dominant group. So basically what this is saying is that the muted group, so there's the co-cultural group and the dominant group, and the co-cultural group has to fix their language so that way the dominant group will accept them. So for an example that I have is a woman in the workplace pitching an idea and a male coworker replying with, I think she's trying to say. So with this, it is the man trying to basically make the woman's idea into his by mansplaining it. The second theory is the standpoint theory. And according to Borland, a feminist theoretical perspective that argues that knowledge stems from social position is what standpoint theory is. In other words, it's people's views of the world. So an example that I gave there is a white person telling a black man that there's no such thing as racism because he has never dealt with it. So the white person believes that there's no such thing as racism because the white person themselves have never experienced racism. Um, And as you can see in this picture, it's kind of another like visual view. So the man doesn't think the puddle is that deep, but the child does. And since the man is in a very shallow puddle, he doesn't believe that any puddle is deep. Okay, so next here are the approaches, the 9 approaches to co-cultural communications. So on the top, there are the preferred outcomes. So assimilation, accommodation, and separation. So this basically talks about if the individual from the co-cultural group will be including themselves with the dominant group, trying to stay away, or completely avoiding the dominant group. And on the side, there's the communication approaches. So it's non-assertive, assertive, and aggressive. So it's rather them trying, actually like pushing themselves and being involved. One was like, the next one is like being involved only when needed, and then the last one is not really being involved, trying to make it their way, kind of an aggressive way. And in each box, it has each of the, one of the outcomes and then one of the approaches. All right. So the study that I decided to choose was the lived experience of African American teachers utilizing co-cultural adaptation at predominantly white rural schools. So this study was done by Tony Eugene Sweet from Eastern Kentucky University. So what he wanted to do was, so to see how African American teachers felt about teaching in predominantly white schools, and asked during an interview questions to see if they had to adapt and how they had to adapt and what communicative behaviors they had. So the purpose of the study was to show the impact of African American teachers have to students, especially African American and Black students. And then also the person searching wanted to know why African American teachers are more involved with their job. And also the researcher also wanted to know how African American teachers felt when they first started, and how the communication was, and how they felt they were being treated. So the outcome of the study is the researcher interviewed 6 different African American teachers to see what their experience was, asking 5 different interview questions. So, and then after the interview, after interviewing all the teachers, it showed that African American frequently experience marginalization in predominantly white schools, which has them develop communication strategies as a way to adapting. So what that is saying is basically that each of the teachers that were interviewed said that even though they were used to being in a predominantly white environment, or even if they felt like everyone was getting along, they had something that they felt was off. Like one of the teachers said that you knew that the Black teachers got the leftovers, as she said. And then others said that they were used to being around white people because they grew up with white people, but they also felt that during parent teacher conferences, it was very difficult to communicate with some of the parents. So the connection between the research and the cultural adaptation is, so this is a direct quote from the study. It says, the co-cultural theory focuses on the factors that influence the persistence of marginalized groups, or 1998, was the first to utilize co-cultural theory to define the communication process between marginalized groups and the dominant societal structures. This theory provides a lens through which one can investigate to communicate methods that marginalized groups employ, and how the methodologies seem to affect their interactions with dominant group members. African American teachers were employed at predominantly white rural school districts in central Appalachia often find themselves ostracized within the workplace, partly due to the cultural differences. So that's the main connection between co-cultural theory and the research. So, and the teachers had to find their way to communicate, whether if it was easy because they're used to it or difficult because it was something new to them. They had to find a way to talk to their coworkers, their the parents of the students, their students, and much more. So in conclusion, the co-cultural communication theory is how people who are part of the co-cultural group use their approach to communicate with people who are part of the dominant group, and what impact them to have this approach, whether if it's the environment or the person they are speaking to. And that's it. Thank you.